Hi, my name is Aaron Hai, and I'm from Whitney High School in Cerritos, California, and I recently found out that I was accepted to Harvard College. PACP has been a help in my high school career for the last 4 years, and I've been taking their ACT classes, which helped me score 35. I found out that the teachers here are the most outstanding teachers possible, as well as the most genuine counselors ever. Miss Kelly has also been a second mother in my life. She's been helping me ever since I started attending here. And without them, I know that I could never achieve my dream of getting into Harvard College.
Okay, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Kelly Chu. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Pacific Academy, the private school in Irvine and North County of San Diego. And I'm also PA College Press founder and the director. I've been in education and as a counselor for more than 21 years. I help more than 5,000 students to get into their dream colleges like Harvard, Yale, Princeton, you name a few. And okay, and let me also introduce today's webinar. It's about 40 minutes, and then we will have 15 minutes for Q&A. Because the webinar speakers cannot see the audience and the audience mic is muted. So if you have any questions, please type in the box at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A box, and we will answer at the end of the presentation. And we will also announce a very special webinar discount only for today's attendees. So please be patient and stay until the end of our webinar. Today's information will be very helpful, I assure you. And then we also offer 30 minutes free counseling session for the student parents and our counselors. So we will share the contact information, then you can contact our staff directly. Okay, so this is our counseling hotline. You can contact our counseling assistant director, Laura. This is her cell phone because now the campus is closed, so we released the cell phone of our staff. And okay, so now that's is today's webinar. Recently, a lot of parents and students are confused or panic. You know, for those who already have a good SAT or ACT score, they feel so bad because, you know, with such a high score, is it useless right now? And I also heard that many parents call and say, oh, my son refused to prepare for SAT because he thinks it's not necessary anymore. So is it true? And I also saw many reports that even you take the SAT, colleges will not look at it. It's not true. Okay, so today our senior counselor and our SAT and ACT specialist, Michael Lathrop, will tell you the SAT and ACT in a time of COVID-19, they are still very valuable. Okay, let me introduce Michael. Michael is PA College Prep SAT and ACT expert. You saw a lot of success stories, and Michael is the major SAT and ACT English teacher to help students to achieve those high score or perfect score. And also, Michael has 15 years of SAT and ACT teaching experience. He's also a college prep counselor and senior counselor. And he is also an AP English and a history teacher at PA College Prep and Pacific Academy. And he's also taught UCI and IVC, San Diego College, this kind of college level English. And he has is a PhD candidate in the Portland State University's master degree in medieval and Renaissance studies. Okay, let's have Michael take over the webinar. Michael?
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Kelly. Okay, minimize you guys here so I can see what I'm doing. So SAT and ACT in the time of COVID-19, they're still valuable. You can see there's, you know, we may need a newer picture of me. I don't know. That's not quite how I look. I was younger, certainly. But I want to ask a few questions, really as sort of rhetorical questions, which is, have you been asking, you know, what's going on? You know, who's doing what? What does this mean that the UCs have changed? I read almost every day about this sort of thing. So if you have questions, it's not really surprising. Really, the functional problem can be boiled down to something that our head counselor, Chris Bonneau, said yesterday, which is everybody is kind of flying blind here. This is a new circumstance. Nobody could have predicted this. Certainly there were already schools that had chosen to go test option with SAT and ACT, but almost all the major schools still required it up until this year. So what I wanted to do is kind of talk about what's going on in this situation, what it means for you and your kids when you're asking the question, where does SAT and ACT fit? Here are the things I'm going to talk about. We want to talk about what they mean when they say test optional, because it may not be immediately clear what that means and how that pertains to whether or not you should take the test. I want to talk about where the SAT and the ACT fit in the college application. One of the things that I think was most useful in some ways as I sort of moved through schools, my undergraduate and then undergraduate work, was coming to a better understanding, especially talking with professors at UCI, about how they're making decisions about what schools look for and understanding how the college application process fit in terms of what they're looking for. Now, you can deduce this anyway if you want to spend an awful lot of time reading. You can go to the various websites of the schools, and if you read carefully, you'll gradually get a good sense of what it is they're really after. But it isn't necessarily clear to any of us without some effort to kind of understand what the pieces of the application are doing and how they're using them. So we want to look at that. And then, I want to look at what taking the SAT and ACT can actually do. Certainly, there are a range of things they're looking at. The SAT and ACT offers one in a range of tools. And I was reading, trying to think of who it was, Carnegie Mellon. We're gonna see a comment from those guys a bit later. But if you look at what they say, they'll tell you that there's no one guarantee. There's no score or GPA that gets you in. There's no SAT score that guarantees you're in. There's no SAT score that guarantees you're out. There's no GPA that they look at and go, you know what, that's it, you're in. It's a holistic approach. They're looking at all the pieces. So we want to see how the SAT and ACT can benefit you, even if they're not requiring it. What can it do for you? And then the last question is, you're like, okay, fine. It's the end of June. What do I do? There are some things you can do to prepare, and we want to look at the big picture to try to understand, where are you, what can you do, and, what are the kind of the timelines like. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. If you guys have any questions, you can certainly throw them to me, and I'm happy to talk about those in as much detail as I can. One of our top counselors, actually, you guys saw a slide with a guy named Aaron High. And I actually worked with Aaron doing SAT and ACT, but his counselor, Margaret, is here today. So she's really the expert. If we get into anything, she'll be there to give us any information we need that sort of moves beyond, the SAT or ACT or even things that I deal with. So first, let's talk about what test optional means. Test optional does not mean we will not accept these scores. And you need to understand what's going on. In March, as things begin to move very quickly, we went, I'm speaking here of California because I want to talk about UCs, which are the big California schools, though they're not the only ones that fit in this conversation. But we went very rapidly from, things are okay to things are not okay to, whoa, we're changing what we're doing. We went over the course of a couple of weeks. My child goes to school here in Southern California. We went very rapidly from going to school regular to staying at home and homeschooling. It was a big jump for all of the faculty members at the high schools to make this switch and make it rapidly. And frankly, they did an amazing job. But they're not alone, right? The colleges had to do this too, and they had to make decisions about what they're going to do for admissions. High schools don't really have that problem. Your admission is based on your location, but for colleges, they are going to ask people to apply. And so when we get to that point in March, where all of a sudden things start shutting down, they're confronted with a problem. What about those kids who had signed up to take the SAT or the ACT or other tests, like the APs or the subject test? What about these kids that had signed up to take this and were not going to be able to take it? If they require these things, That's a problem because they're effectively excluding those kids from application or the application process through no fault of the kid's own. So the decision on the part of the UCs and pretty much everybody else, if you go look at the websites in admissions, and they all have, every one of them that I've looked at, and I've looked at all the top 20 schools, UCs, and a bunch of others, all say something very similar. Because this is so unexpected and because it would be unfair to tell students, listen, you don't have an SAT score, we're not going to let you in, when it was through no fault of their own, they've decided to go optional. What they're saying is, if you have a score, you can turn it in. If you don't, and they all say this very explicitly, it will not be held against you. Your application will not be lowered. It won't be put at the bottom of the pile. They won't treat it any differently. They'll simply treat it equal, right? Lacking that data point. They don't say, you failed to do something. They just go, here's the information we have. The UC system has clearly stated that they'll accept the SAT and ACT for this year and for the next 2 years as test optional, meaning you can turn in the scores. They've also clearly stated that they'll use it in application decisions. This is a quote from the UC. They've said test optional for fall 2021 and 2022. Campuses will have the option to use the ACT, SAT test scores in selection consideration if applicants choose to submit them, and will develop appropriate policies and procedures to implement the board's decisions. In other words, you can see them here saying they're making changes, but because this is so open-ended, nobody really knows what's going to happen. Are we going to, see a resurgence that's going to push them back into a lockdown? We don't know that. UCLA announced this week that they're only going to have somewhere between 10 and 20% of their classes in person, and the rest are going to be online. They're trying to make decisions about the future. They're doing the best they can, but because they don't know, they have to leave things open-ended. So no school, with the exception of Caltech, has said we will not look at test scores. That is what we call test blind, when they say we will not look at test scores. We will not use them. Every other school, all the major schools, and many of them, by the way, have decided to go test optional only in the last 2 weeks. As recently as as recently as June 9th, half of the top 20 schools still required it. Since then, virtually all have made it optional. And I think you can assume that that's going to go forward for the next year or two, because it's just not clear that this problem is going to be resolved in 6 months or 9 months or a year. So in trying to make decisions about how they're going to act appropriately, rather than make a blanket statement, we're done, what they've said is, for those that have done it, we'll accept the numbers. For those who haven't, we will accept them without the numbers. Virtually all of them have said that they're going to do this for the next year or two. In most cases, they're a little firmer. The UC in May made a more substantial decision. Most of them have said this is for 1 or 2 years only, and then they will revisit or reconsider this question, probably, as you might guess, because they're going to look at how application process went over the last couple of years and see if it makes a difference. If they feel that they are doing fine without the SAT and ACT, they may continue test optional. They may drop it if they feel they think it's useful. They may keep it. Nobody knows. And I don't think the schools know either. So for now, what we're looking at is a situation where the majority of schools will accept the SAT or ACT, as well as some of the other scores like subject tests or AP. They're not requiring, but they will still use them. So let's consider what you're actually doing with a successful college application. There are really only 4 parts to it. You could call it a 5th if you want, because you actually have to fill out a form that gives detail about your family background, whether somebody in your family went to the school or things like that. That's all just data and shouldn't, for the most part, have much effect on their decision. But these things will, and I've put them more or less probably in the order that it is valued. I don't say that this is the absolute order. You might be able to argue that standardized test scores are more valuable than extracurricular activities. That wouldn't be unreasonable. But grades, essays, extracurricular activities, standardized test scores. The goal of this is a reasonably complete picture of the applicant as a student and as a person. Right? Remember that when you're applying to a college, there is a lot more to it than just going to class. You're quite often going to live on the campus. You're going to be part of clubs. You may be part of the student government. And so they're interested in those things too. You're not just asking, can I go take classes here? You're really asking to be part of a community. Of course, it's an academic community. And so almost in any context, you could reasonably expect them to treat grades as the most important, because grades show what you did day in, day out, on average, over the course of a lengthy period of time. All the things being equal, if you were a good student in high school, you're going to be a good student in college, because showing up and doing the work is very important. Essays. Essays are important because the vast majority of students have to, at some point or other, not every class and every time, have to be able to write. When I was teaching writing at UCI, I asked one of the professors who was actually in a STEM area, and I said, you know, writing is the only class that every student here has to take. And he said, yes, here is the problem. I have kids who are brilliant, kids who are solving the problems of today and tomorrow. And he goes, but it won't do any good if they can't write up what they're doing, get it published, and spread that information around. The key component here for science, right, really is to make sure that you are getting the information and then being able to produce it to the public. So, extracurricular activities, right? For extracurricular activities, they're looking at how you are as kind of a citizen. They're looking at what you've done and what you're interested in doing, the kinds of things that you're going to bring to the school, right? Your interest in, let's say, particular types of clubs. Maybe it's a movie club, maybe it's sports, maybe it's student government. Any of these things really valuable, right? And then finally, standardized test scores. The standardized test scores serve a couple of different functions for them, but one of the things it does is allow them to kind of look at you as a student and say, you know, where do you fit in relationship to, you know, other students? Because the one thing that standardized test scores do is allow them to use a kind of single ruler for everybody. But remember the bottom part. The goal is a reasonably complete picture of the applicant as a student and a person, right? They're trying to get the big picture. And so these are all pieces they're going to use. And as I said, Carnegie Mellon says this very explicitly. The rest of them do as well. So if you think about it, this leads to the notion that, is there a way to give them a best version of you, if you will, a complete picture? And the answer is yeah. There's two types of information. If they want to assess you as a student, they're going to look at your grades. Their grades are going to tell them, how you did. They're going to show things like consistency, show things like effort. And then there's the ACT and the ACT. The SAT and the ACT, because they're standardized tests, are more grounded. They're sort of very short, if you will, compared to a class, but they show a range of things that represent kind of your ability, right? Your native ability to do certain kinds of core things: read, interpret, understand language, do math problems with and without calculators, or if you take ACT, even a few other things like your familiarity with science, right? What it does is give them a chance to assess your ability in these core competencies in a particular and kind of limited structure. So if you think about it, the SAT and the ACT show what your kind of potential is, like what you could do. Your grades will show more or less what you did do. Because the SAT and ACT, you can have a great day, you can get a high score, but your grades are really built over time. As a person, right, and in some ways this is very important, you use the essays, and if you look at, for example, the UC essays or the ACT prompts, UC's asked for 4 personal insight questions. They're relatively short, 350 words, but each one of them is designed to elicit something about you. And they're often about things that aren't necessarily academic. They may ask what you did for your community, or what your greatest talent is, or to tell them about a time that you had some difficulty. Because what this is doing is revealing not just how you write, which they're interested in. They want to see, whether you're literate, whether you can write a reasonable essay, but they're really much more interested in who you are as a person, what you value, how you learn, how you respond to difficulties, all things that will be relevant in your college career. And then, of course, as I said, extracurriculars, that aspect of your life that exists outside of the classroom, but is still part of the larger community, and is an important part of college. There are many clubs, right? Many different kinds of groups. Virtually any interest that you have can be explored. And they want the students to be part of that community because it makes for a stronger college and makes for a more complete, if you will, educational experience. So there's the 4 pieces. And now you get a better sense maybe of some of the things that the SAT and the ACT can do, right? Here are some relatively specific things that colleges are going to do with the SAT or the ACT. One of the most important things is it allows them to compare students from different schools and different school systems. Because every student comes from a different background, a different part of the country, a different kind of school, it's not always easy for them to look at a GPA or a class and know what that really represents, right? So one of the ways that SAT and ACT have used in the past is as a kind of yardstick to, sort of compare students in a way that is approximately equal. This doesn't necessarily answer to some of the concerns that people have had about the SAT or the ACT, that they might be unfair to certain groups. Those things may well exist, but it allows them to take students from one part of the country and from another part of the country, from a private school, from a public school, from a big school or a small school, and see how those students compare in their kind of core skills. Right? They might use it for other things like class placement, right? Virtually every student comes in and has to take a writing course. Often they have to take math courses. And so they may use these things to kind of help assess them. Now, in my own experience, many colleges also have their own internal assessment. So they might be using them both together. But the bottom line is it allows them to get a sense of where you fit compared to other students that have been through their system, and therefore what classes you're most likely to succeed in. Finally, scholarships. Certainly the UC does this, and many of the others might as well consider your SAT or ACT scores as part of, again, that larger holistic view of you as a student that helps them decide where they want to allocate scholarships, grants, or other kinds of things. The bottom line is that standardized tests provide an independent, nationwide assessment of core competencies: math, reading, grammar, again, science, kind of in the SAT, more so in the ACT, and humanities. It's sort of independent of local variables. It doesn't depend on, again, a particular curriculum. It's not based on one school system. It's not based on one set of students. It is very broad. And so to that extent, tends to be a reasonable ruler or yardstick to measure students from different groups to, kind of see how they compare, imperfect though it may be. So this leads us to the question of what exactly, the SAT and the ACT can do for you. And there are a range of things that it can do, actually, and all of them can be valuable, right? You may need one, you may need all, you may not need any of them, right? But for example, we've already seen that there are 4 different elements to the application. We have the essays, we have the extracurriculars, we have your GPA, your grades, and your coursework. And so if one or more of these are not as strong as they might have otherwise been, and especially since I suggested to you that there are kind of 2 ways of looking as a student and as a person. If your grades maybe are not as strong as they might have been, maybe you have a few bad classes in there, the SAT is a way to show them, that you are a capable academic, because it is focused on those core competencies. Maybe your essays are not as strong. Every year when I work with students, I always have the conversation, especially with the UCs, we're doing multiple essays. Most 17-year-olds do not have like 4 or 5 or 10 great, really engaging stories to talk about. That's frankly fairly normal. I have a number of amusing stories. I don't know how many I have, but I have a number of them. But that's because I'm old. I've been around a long time, right? So for most students, I'm going to argue they're going to get one really good essay. They're going to get one that's pretty good. They're going to get one that's so-so. And the last one is just kind of just get it in there. It's a little outside of their wheelhouse, maybe not their strongest point. So if your essays are not as strong as you might be, having that extra data point to kind of balance that off can be something that can help balance out an application, right? Think about if they're looking at 4 different things and they see, one kind of weaker and 2 good ones. If you can add a 4th or a 3rd good one, that really kind of brings your whole application up. So it's just a way to help offset places where maybe you didn't do quite as well as you would have liked, or you have some kind of thing that you think, you know what, if I could show them they're doing well, this would strengthen this overall application. The next step forward is what happens when you get to the top level. And I'm like, well, okay, what happens when everybody has a top GPA, straight A's? What happens when everybody has great essays? What happens when everybody has great extracurriculars? I volunteered in old folks home. I, worked at the local, pound saving puppies. Everything looks good. I'm like, well, one thing you can do is to add an additional data point. Again, remember that for the school, an A is an A. So when they're looking at students' grades, when they're looking at the essays, if they're all similar, the question is, well, what else might they look at? And again, I don't think it's reasonable to suggest that they're going to say, well, you guys are basically equal, but your SAT is higher, you're in. That isn't really how that works, but it will strengthen the overall argument that you're a strong or valid student and that you have the capability of doing well in their school system. And then finally, provide an independent standard of evaluation. I think that, college committees do a very good job of trying to incorporate students from all over the country, from different backgrounds, different parts of the country. But at the same time, they don't necessarily know the town that you went to, or what that school is like. And so when they're looking at it, an additional support that justifies that may be something that helps move your application along. I think in general that the process is very balanced, but they're also reading a lot of essays. They're reading a lot of applications, so that anything that you can add that is a kind of additional piece of information that they can use to kind of help make that choice, and which helps keep you in, then I think you should do that. So when you look at a school like UCLA, over 100,000 applications last year. The vast majority of those kids are not going to get accepted. Even fewer are going to go, because many of those kids got accepted to other good schools and choose to go there. Anything that you can do to keep yourself in that group, I think, is going to be a net positive for you. So I want to look at what some of the schools, these were all taken from school websites, all of them published very recently. This first one from MIT, I think was published towards the end of May, but they mentioned them to be updated. So, and they may yet update these. Again, remember what our head counselor, Chris Bonneau, says, that this is a kind of unknown. You're watching these schools grapple and work through this, grapple with this problem and work through this sort of live. So things can change. But here's what MIT has said. As you may know, MIT applicants are required to take either the SAT or the ACT. The TOEFL is strongly recommended, right? But we no longer require nor consider SAT subject exams, right? So you can see here they've kind of made a distinction. They're gonna go with the SAT or the ACT. They're not going to require, but they're also just going to test blind. They're not even going to look at them. They're not going to look at these subject exams, right? By comparison, Dartmouth, this is from their admissions website. We will welcome any testing element a student chooses to share, the SAT, the ACT, subject test, and AP score, or none at all. Our admissions committee will review each candidacy without second guessing the admission of the presence of a testing element. In other words, they'll look at it, and if it helps reveal something about you, then so much the better. They are not going to penalize students who don't submit these things. But if you think that you could use an additional boost, if you'd like to put something else on the table, they're willing to look at it. Carnegie Mellon has, way too far. Carnegie Mellon has adopted a test optional policy for 1 year, removing the standardized testing requirements for first year fall 2021 applicants. Applicants who are non-native speakers of English are still required to submit results of either TOEFL or IELTS, English language proficiency. They went on to talk about some other stuff. I didn't want to show the whole thing, because fairly long. If you have any questions, you can go to their website and look at their admissions policy and see what they're doing. But I wanted to give you a sense of kind of the range of kind of responses as schools try to grapple with what to do with these circumstances and how tightly they're going to hold on to it. And the answer is they're not going to hold on to it too tightly. The vast majority of them recognize that through circumstances that no student can control, that very good students may lack access to some of these things. In other cases, they may say they want it, not very many, in which case, if you want to go there, then you're going to do it. So, just remember that all the schools are kind of there with the rest of us. They're trying to figure out what to do about these unusual circumstances and provide a fair way. As Kelly mentioned at the beginning, if you've already taken the test and you've gotten a good score, do not throw your hands up in the air. It's not wasted time, right? They're still going to accept, some may require it, not many, but they're still going to accept it, and you should still submit it because it shows something positive about you. And that is something that you want to go ahead and put in the hands of the committee. Give them as much information as they can so that they can make the best decision. So what can you do to prepare? Well, both the SAT and ACT are planning for tests during the fall. Now, a number of schools, by the way, just recently, I mentioned that a number of the top schools changed to SAT, ACT optional in June, and they were really responding to the fact that the SAT and ACT were not going to provide online tests during the summer. And the schools felt that if that created a limitation in access, that they couldn't reasonably, I think, continue demanding it. Currently, we'll look at the schedule in just a moment, but currently both the SAT and the ACT are planning tests for the fall. But the truth is, nobody knows for sure if those are going to come off. There may be local circumstances, and that has always been the case, by the way. You should know that in the past, schools have foregone the SAT and ACT requirements when it was mandated. For example, if a part of the country experienced a natural disaster like a hurricane or an earthquake or flooding, they would allow students from those areas to take shorter versions of the test, or even not take the test and accept their applications. So if a state shuts down and has to cancel, they're not going to exclude those kids, right? So we don't really know for sure even that the SAT and the ACT are going to be provided in the fall, but they are currently planning to. They have scheduled test dates. They're accepting registrations. And many schools will accept scores from the December tests. That is, you could still take the test as late as December and submit it for, the UCs or schools that have application dates after January 1st, February 1st, and so on. So there's still plenty of time. If you're like, well, I didn't know this, maybe I should get on the test. I'm like, fine, you still have plenty of time. You have months to deal with this. I don't recommend that you wait that long. The sooner you can get on top of this, the better. But note that if you wanted to get a couple of tests under your belt, you actually could. Getting started now for seniors who are interested in early action, early decision is probably more important. If you're looking at a particular school, you're thinking early action, say November 1st, then you're definitely going to be taking one of the earlier tests. You may already have a score on your belt, but if you don't, then you still have a chance to take a test and get it under your belt. As I said, the UC system will still be accepting and using SAT and ACT for 2 more years. So if you are an incoming junior, that is, you're going to be a junior this fall, you still have the option to submit SAT and ACT as part of your application next year. That is for your beginning year. And then finally, a lot of schools have said very specifically, we're only going test optional for 1 or 2 years. Now, I don't think you should say that means that they're definitely going to go back. That is not a fair assessment. They are making this decision, as I said, based on circumstances. They are recognizing that this is not a 1 week or a 1 month problem. So what they've said is, we're going to do this for a couple of years. I think you can assume that every school is going to watch how their admissions go and see how much this decision affects them. And then, they'll make decisions later on, and they may return to requirement. They may stay optional. They may drop it altogether. We just don't know. And there's no reason to expect them to know either. Everybody is working through this. There just is not any data about what this means for them. There are other schools that have gone test optional, so you can certainly look at their data, but that doesn't necessarily apply. And schools may not be comfortable making decisions on the basis of that. So they're going to try it. A couple years down the road, we'll know where we're at. So in the meantime, my little comment here at the bottom, you have nothing to lose. Get a good score, submit it. If you feel that you are a borderline student, but you might be able to improve to a good score, then I think it's worth looking at. If you are looking at a school that, flat out doesn't require it, or, you're not a good test taker, and I've had students that simply, did not do well in standardized tests, in part because of, anxiety and tests, stuff like that, then, by and large, this may not be the time, but you still got nothing to lose by trying it, because if you take the test and don't do well, you don't have to submit it. If you take the test and do well, you can submit it. Right. And for some students, this may have extra sort of impact. I know some students were counting on, especially for the UCs that look at your sophomore and junior GPA, they were counting on this semester, spring semester, to boost their GPA. And now a lot of schools have shifted to, credit, no credit. So suddenly that disappears. I'm like, well, okay, there's one of those weaknesses we're talking about. They're still accepting the SAT and the ACT. So it may be that you want to consider taking it. So here's a look at the test dates as they're planned. You can see the SAT in particular has added a date. I don't know if they added one or two, but the August date, August 29th, they're offering both the SAT and the subject test, September 26th. SAT only after that. Every other month they are offering both the SAT and subject test, though you'll want to check the schedule. I do not believe, as is usual for them, that they're offering every subject test every time. So some tests are offered pretty much every time, usually the core subjects. Some are only offered once or twice a year. So depending on your subject, you may need to check and see when they're offering it. If it's something relatively less common, then they may only offer it one or two tests. For the ACT, they have 3 tests: the September, the October, and the December tests. So 12th, 24th, and then again on December 12th, they're offering the ACT. So you got a lot of opportunities to take the test, so much so that you can even do something that I would recommend for most students. If you don't do it at the start, you should do it at some point, which is to try both of them and see which one you're best at. For whatever reason, they're very similar, but they're somewhat different tests. For whatever reason, students sometimes do better on one than the other. And I have to tell you, even after doing this for 15 years, I cannot predict who it's going to be. I've had students that, said, I'm going to try the ACT. I'm like, well, good luck. And they do very, very well on it. I've had the students who are like, I'm going to do the ACT. I'm like, well, that should benefit you. And didn't do much for them. So you should try both tests. I don't say pay for it. If you want to, do it through us or another prep school, try an SAT and then try an ACT, see which one you did better on, see which one you like better. Sometimes just feeling better about the test is enough to really justify switching from one to the other. But you should try them both. And then if you get to a point where you are feel that you're capable of doing a good score, then go take the test. With the best of all cases, you'll get a great score. You'll add it to your application. You'll have, sort of all those pieces. You can hand them over and say, here I am, and give them as much information as possible to make, as I said, the best information or best decision possible. Okay, hopefully I haven't boomed through that too quickly, but I wanted to go ahead and get to the Q&A so we don't keep you here too long. So let me take a quick look.
Michael.
Okay. So the first question here, my daughter already received 1,500 on the SAT, GPA is 4.5, strong extracurricular goals apply to top 10. Do you suggest that she take the SAT again to aim for higher scores? I would think no, generally speaking. 1,500 is pretty solid. If you look at any of the schools that talk about the SAT, what they're going to tell you is there's no cutoff where you get in for sure. In other words, a perfect score does not get you in for sure. There's really no cutoff below. What they do say is they look for students that have challenged themselves and, sort of grown. That said, there is no downside to taking a second test. Again, you just retake the test, and in some cases it may benefit you if you get a better score. For example, they may be able to super score, in which case they'll take the highest score in each section from the different tests. Some of the top 20 colleges do that for sure. So the bottom line is, I wouldn't necessarily say at 1,500 you have to. There's no downside to doing it though. So in a way that's kind of a sure, go ahead. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time laying awake at night worrying about it. 1500 is a great score. And even if you look at the top schools, the average score is usually somewhere for the SAT, it's somewhere in like 1520 to 1540, which means they're taking students below that. So it's kind of a question of whether you can do better. And in part that might take into account how many tests you've already done. As I mentioned in previous webinars, studies of SAT students taking tests show that there's a significant jump from the first and the second test in terms of score. There's another much smaller jump from the second to the third test on average. And then after that, very few students improve any if all. So if your 1500 was your third test, it's unlikely you're going to improve. If it was your first, it might be worthwhile taking it again. Let's see, next question. My son is a junior. He took the SAT twice and his scores were 1480. His goal is 1550. Do you have any suggestions how to improve his score? If he's already done it twice, it depends a little bit on what he's done to prep, but I'll tell you, for a student in the 1480 level, and if you go back and look at some of the students on our website or some of the students that are mentioned in the sort of marketing stuff, a lot of the students are students that worked with me one-on-one, often because the math is a little easier to nail down. The reading is a little harder for students who are often not strong readers, or it's not as, sort of black and white as math is. But at that point, what I really do is I sit down and go to the test, and I'm doing certain kinds of analyses looking for patterns of behavior. So I can't suggest, without looking at a student's test, what's going on, but I can tell you there are, if you want to look at the test yourself, you can look for the same things I'm looking for. If you see a student missing one or two questions in a lot of different areas, what you're seeing is a student that's having some trouble with method. That is, they can get most of those types of questions right, but when they get the hardest one, their skill isn't quite up to par to figure out how to get past that last hardest version. If what you see is students missing a lot of questions in one or two areas, that's usually skill-based. That means they need to study more. If they, miss all the main point questions, then they have trouble identifying and understanding what to do with theses, for example. They're like, I know a teacher talks about the thesis, but how do I know when I'm looking at one? And so that means becoming more familiar with what they look like, what kind of arguments they make, and we're going to find them. So it really comes down to the student. There isn't any, at 1480, there isn't any one thing that I can say. When we get lower, I'm like, if you're scoring 520 in English and, reading combined, I'm like, you need to work on vocabulary, you need to work on reading, right? Just the familiarity of reading and reading quickly. You need to work on vocabulary, recognize things, and then you need to maybe work on some specific stuff like grammar or sentence structure and things like that. And it's much more skill-based. But once we get into the top scores, there can be a range of things going on. It's hard to know exactly without looking at it, without looking at the test and the student to see what they're doing. Common question, both SAT and the ACT, and the scores are the same. How can we decide if she should focus on the SAT or ACT? If that question really comes down to the student, the schools will not treat the test differently. They treat the SAT and ACT the same. They value them the same way. So my general answer is, if a student has taken both the SAT and the ACT and the scores aren't that different, which is fairly common, I'll just ask the student, like, which one do you like better? There's a science section on the ACT, and it's really kind of a reading section, a lot of reading, but it's based in physics and geology and biology and chemistry. If students hate chemistry, I'm like, man, that's going to be a pain for you. You're always going to suffer doing it. Maybe the SAT with just reading, writing, and math. Sometimes it's a language issue. I just said that the ACT adds basically an extra reading section. There's a lot of reading in the science section. For students that are weak in reading, whether just because they don't like to read or maybe they're non-native speakers, maybe the SAT benefits them with two math sections instead of just the one in the ACT. So those are the two things I'd probably be looking at. Is there a benefit in terms of the student's comfort level, and where is the student's comfort level? If they prefer one test, that's probably the one they should be doing. Then we get, my daughter will be 9th grade in the fall or goes to apply for the UCs. Do you suggest her to prepare for the SAT and the ACT? And I think at this point, in some cases, especially because I do English, The answer to that is kind of yes, because whatever she does to prepare for English will actually help her in English class. But I don't know that I would suggest a ninth grader be hitting the books for SAT, ACT. It's kind of open-ended at this point. We don't know for sure. UCs have said after a couple of years they're going to go test blind, so they're not going to accept them for a couple of years. So that may factor in your decision. Of course, the UCs aren't the only schools. Some schools may switch back. I think that's a question you have to revisit sometime in 10th grade. Get a year and a half down the road. Let's see where people are. But in the meantime, what could you be doing? You could be working on skills that will port to the SAT or ACT, like essay writing, or taking reading and writing classes, taking math classes, taking science classes. Those things are all things that you can do in school, or you can do with us, or both, that will give you the ability. Because the bottom line is, when some student says to me, how do I do well at the SAT? I'm like, just know everything. If you learn a lot, you'll do well. If you're a good student in school, you will do well in the SAT. You may have some difficulty with the format. We can help you with that, but you'll already have the knowledge you need. So for a ninth grader entering the fall right now, it's an open-ended question. I would be working on core skills, things like reading, writing, essay writing. Specifically, there's other types of writing that you might want to think about, things like job-oriented stuff, resumes, or technical writing. Then core skills in the STEM area, extracurricular activities, things that you can do to boost your application, regardless of whether they're going to take the SAT or ACT, but will help you if they decide to apply them. Oh, Kelly, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah. Yeah. Good. I think you answered all the questions, and there are still 5 more questions in the Q&A. Michael,
Yep.
Do you want to look at it? And Margaret, do you want to help Michael to answer some of the questions? There's a question about the college essays. Margaret.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So, yeah, Margaret, you want to read the question for Michael and then decide which, and then you two decide which who will answer.
Yeah, so I think the majority of the questions are going to be, Michael, you'll be the person for them. So the first question is, since UC will eliminate the SAT as a requirement, do you recommend students to take SAT with essay? Any difference if we only take SAT without essay? Does PA still teach essay part in your SAT program?
Yeah. So, Margaret, what do you think about this? I have some ideas, but you deal with this, fairly regularly. What do you think?
I think that if you're already going to prepare for the SAT, you should just go ahead and take the essay. And as Michael pointed out, that you are providing the university with another data point. So the advantage of taking the essay section is that you're showing them that you're going to put in another extra effort into having another data point for them to evaluate you. So while you're already preparing for the multiple choice section, you can just go ahead and do it for the essay. And while the UC is eliminating that requirement, you still have to take into consideration all the other colleges that you're applying to. So as popular and as prestigious as are the UCs, we really highly recommend that our students think of other college options, because you just don't know where you will be accepted, and then by the time you get accepted, there are other things that can happen, and so you really want to broaden your options in terms of where you want to go to college. So I at least as somebody who really values the essay and being able to show off your writing skills, you really want that as something that is available to the admissions officers.
Yeah, and we do still teach the essay part in both the SAT and the ACT. We dedicate some time to doing the essay. The essay is hard to improve in certain respects. I mean, writing is a difficult task, but as Margaret said, it's extremely valuable. Every student has to write. Every student has to take a writing class. So there's really no downside, I think, to it. We certainly teach it. I continue to teach. I sometimes even do writing outside, just like students that are working with just our English class, helping them work through essays and understand the essay process. So I would concur, surely. Next question about the online ACT testing. So they're not, that I know of, they're not currently planning online testing, but I will say this, the online testing was kind of iffy for the AP test. There were some problems, which is why SAT canceled the online testing. But I think it kind of remains to be seen exactly how they're going to do it. Margaret, what did you think about this?
I mean, the ACT online, I did see that there were a lot of technical requirements that they that need to be set up for that. So, given that what you have been talking about in terms of like preparation for the ACT and SAT, what's more important is for now to really concentrate on the possible content, because what the ACT online will do is, if that is the only available option, then they will definitely release information on how you want to adapt to the technical requirements. So whether, there are many tests that are online. So for example, like the TOEFL and the IELTS have like an online option, especially the TOEFL. What's more important is that you can actually answer the content questions, because you can just adapt to the technical requirements of the test. Does that make sense?
Yeah, fantastic. Another question, is it better if I submit both the SAT and the ACT? Kelly, you want to take this one?
Oh, I think colleges usually just pick whichever is higher. So if you both, you have a very high score on both. For example, you have a 1560 on SAT and a 35 on ACT, why not submit both, right? But if your one score is a much higher than the other one, I think one will be enough. College really see the SAT and ACT the same, whichever is higher.
Yeah, the only difference I can think of is, if you were a STEM major and you did really well on the STEM, then, you might want to submit the ACT over the SAT. And the question is, well, what if my reading and writing was better than the SAT? I'm like, well, there are some different things. The ACT has this year offered the option of retaking individual sections so that you could go and actually sit down and was it ACT or SAT? Maybe it's SAT. But the bottom line is, they treat the ACT and the SAT the same in terms of score. The only difference then is the ACT offers a science section for STEM majors that might be valuable to get that in as a data point. But like Kelly said, you go with your top score. Let's see, where's the best place to start when writing a college essay? This is a good, tough question because it's easy to answer in some ways. I guess I'm gonna give a bit of an answer and maybe ask if Margaret would like to offer something a bit more in depth. But I'll simply suggest the best college essays that I've found are often about things that are personal and reveal something meaningful about you, something that they might be interested in knowing, things about like how you interact when things do not go well, or how you plan, or something like that. Margaret, would you like to add to that?
So what I would say about, so for this question, the best place to start when writing the college essay. So one strategy that I'd like you to think about. The first strategy is, I want you to consider what you would say about your major. So if you've already picked a major, what is it that's prepared you for that major? What are the things related to your major? So I want you to pretty much answer like why you want to do this major. And once you're done with that, pretty much everything else that you write about shouldn't be about that, okay? So once you've already kind of at least bullet pointed all of the things related to the major towards the part of you that's a student, the academic part, as Michael has shown that colleges are looking at you in terms of being a student and being a person. Once that has already been put into one area, then you can already start to look at, okay, what are all of the other things that I can offer that I can contribute to this school? And then you can make your notations, okay? So from there, then you can look at, what are my extracurricular activities, for example? What are the meaningful experience that I've had there? How have I shown my values? What are the things that I really care about? So that's how I would approach it from, given that there's so many things that they're asking you to do, but a lot of students lean a lot towards what has prepared them for the major. That the danger is that they repeat those things in all of the other questions. So start with why you want to do this major and why you want to go to college specifically for that major. And then from there, then you could create a process of elimination, or kind of like a process of addition for the other questions that may come up.
Okay. Thank you.
So, sorry, let me just quickly go back, because I know Michael already answered that question about freshman students, if they're going to take the SAT and ACT. I think graduates of 2023, they're going to be sophomores, right? Is that correct?
I think so.
Sophomore, yes.
Right.
Sophomores. So I mean, I would say that I agree with Michael that if you want to prepare for the SAT and SAT, preparing for that will definitely help you in your English classes. And one of the, when he mentioned the math, it's always, do you really have the skill set for the math anyway? So if you don't really have the skill set for the math, then it would be very difficult. It'd be more challenging to do any SAT and ACT prep, just because you've never had the content before. So if you are only going to be at geometry your sophomore year, then you still have a lot more to do towards understanding what's actually going to be offered in terms of the math. Do you have any other additions to that, Michael, for writing?
No, I think that sums it up nicely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to say that even though UC is saying that they will create their own test, but majority of the colleges still take SAT and ACT. Of course, if your goal is only UC, since nobody knows what the test will be like, but most of actually all the tests are very similar. Like we compare SAT and ACT, 70% of their content are the same. So when you prepare for SAT and ACT, you are building a strong foundation, because what we do in class is we want to build a strong foundation for the student, so you become a better student. And so if you do well on the SAT and ACT, I believe you can also do well on the other tests. So I think it's never a waste of time. Oh, if I prepare for SAT and then I'm not taking SAT, or SAT becomes, like useless for UC, you are still, build a better foundation. So I think, all the students, if you have time for the summer, especially this summer, you don't have much to do. Why not just focus on SAT and ACT preparation? And so if you can take care of the test, get the score you want, then you can just focus on other things. So don't have to worry about test prep anymore in the next few years. Isn't that great? Yeah. Okay. And also I would like to mention, even the test, like SAT and ACT become test option, still the colleges want TOEFL. So if you're international students and you don't finish your 4 years of high school in the US, you need to take TOEFL. So don't think the TOEFL become optional. TOEFL is still mandatory.
Yeah.
So make sure you prepare for that. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the next question.
So again, it's the next question is it better to do my college application junior or senior year? Again, I think Margaret would probably speak best to that. My general feeling is they can start, certainly in their junior year. One of my students this year actually were using an essay that he wrote in school for this, like they had him do one. He wasn't that confident. I said, well, let's take a look at it. But I know I have my students already working, and I'll bet Margaret's had hers working from even before me.
Yeah, I agree. So what from my point of view, I really think of juniors as pre-seniors. And the reason why I think of that as pre-seniors is that the junior year is essentially the most difficult and challenging year academically. So by the time you're a senior, you'll still have a lot of challenging classes, but then the fall of that year it's just completely new because of all of these applications. So ideally, you do want to familiarize yourself with what colleges are looking for, what they are asking. So it's fine if you wanted to sign up for a Common App account in your junior year, because your account information will roll over in the following fall. So it's really key to have an open conversation with your family about what are the potential schools that you would want to go to. And so that way, if you are already thinking about those schools, then you can see what they're asking about. So if you think about your junior year, the fall is going to be super busy with new schools. So it's ideally you want to already start thinking about where you're going to apply and what you may want to write in the second semester of your junior year, which is essentially only about 6 months before you submit those applications. It's really not that long. So if it's possible for you to already start brainstorming and really have that big calendar in mind to really see what you're doing within, the next 6 to 9 months, because it's not that you're going to try to write your essays in November, because that's, November of your senior year, because that's really not what you should be doing, because you still have to do really well in your classes. You still have to show up for the people in your extracurricular activities. If at all possible, you've already put in at least the brain work to figure out how to represent yourself in those essays. So ideally, if no later than the second semester of your junior year is when I really think you should have a sense of where you may want to go, what you may want to say. And for, those are the things that we really care about when we work with our students, is to really help you give a sense, to give you a sense of what is going to be ahead of you. And we want to be able to make sure that you hit those benchmarks so that you're not scrambling when AP tests come. You're not scrambling if you're going to take a second SAT test, and you're not scrambling to write those essay or ask letters of recommendation in September, because by September, if you haven't figured out what you want to do, where you want to go, what you want to say, it's really going to be a super stressful time for yourself and, for the other people who have to be around you.
Yeah. Exactly, especially many students want to do early decision or early application, which is due November 1st. But a lot of students actually are not ready. They don't have a good test score yet, or their essays are not finished yet. So it is definitely better to start the college application process in junior year. It will give you more time to write better essay. And then if you want to do early decision, then you have an opportunity to do it. Okay, so
hey, Kelly, I just wanted to throw this out. I thought that was a great segue to talk about Chris's upcoming webinar, because Margaret was talking about choosing colleges and stuff like that. So would you like to introduce Chris's webinar?
Yes. The other question, one more. Where
I'm
can
sorry. Yeah, there is.
Application sample so I can visualize how it is like. Okay, we actually share a lot of success story and how we help the students, to step by step to become a stronger and stronger student, and eventually got into their dream colleges. So we actually have a webinar every Saturday. In our webinar, we use a lot of our success story. We share our experience and the how we help the students. So you will find these examples. And next week, next Saturday, is very important, how to choose your college list. The speaker will be our counseling director, Mr. Chris Bono. He will, because now a lot of students are, say, they have no idea about the college. There are more than 4,000 colleges in the US. How can you choose? Some students or parents will say, I want to apply to the top 20. I want to apply to only the school in the top 30. So it is really, is it realistic? So we always encourage students, of course, you should apply to your dream colleges, but at the same time, you should always choose the college that's matched, that you have a chance to get in. And then no matter how, every year is different. So you should always have some backup colleges, but every college on the list should be the college that you want to go to. Don't just apply to a bunch of colleges and then eventually none of them is the one you really want to go, and then you don't know what to do, and they say, I'll go to the community college. So definitely there are many, many good colleges, and some colleges are like great, but not that hard to get in. They're like A+ colleges for these students. So our counselor can definitely help you, to choose the best college list that fits your needs. So next Saturday, 1 o'clock, how to choose your college list. So please sign up with the link. And also, I think that's all for today. Oh, one more thing I would like to mention. We also post our webinar video on our pacollegeprep.com website. So if you go to our website and click webinar, you will see our webinar video. We will post there for a week or two. So if you think it's helpful, you can ask for example, the parents, you can ask your child to visit our website and to watch the video. And also you can ask your friend. All the information we share is very helpful and very honest information. So we hope just to help you. Okay, so the next. So if you are interested to schedule a pre-counseling session with our counselor, please contact our, this is the counseling information.
Right.
Yeah, counseling hotline for Laura. Or if you want to information about our classes, and so you can contact our office, PA College Prep office, this one. Okay, thank you everybody for your time. We look forward to see all of you next Saturday. Thank you, and thank you for your time. And I hope this webinar is helpful. And so if you have any question, feel free to contact us. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Mark.